The polished glass doors of Hamilton and Coiffeur's, one of the city's most respected firms, gleamed under the morning sun. Inside the lobby, the atmosphere was sharp, with the scent of freshly brewed coffee and the faint echo of hurried footsteps. Candidates. For the management trainee position sat in neat rows, each clutching a folder, their faces masks of confidence, or at least the appearance of it. Marcus Williams sat quietly in the corner, his tie knotted with meticulous care, his resume resting on his lap. His palms were damp, not from fear but from the weight of what this interview meant. It wasn't just a job, it was a chance to rewrite his story. After years of working night shifts, balancing classes, and raising his younger sister, he finally had the qualifications that could put him in the room where decisions were made, not just followed. He looked around at the other applicants. Most were younger, casually confident, chatting about their university clubs and summer internships. Marcus, with his slightly worn shoes and a face that carried both fatigue and determination, felt like an outsider in their world of easy privilege. The ray. Glass doors swung open with a whoosh, drawing every eye. A tall white man in an immaculate navy suit strode in. His presence filled the room with an aura of superiority that didn't need announcing. This was Richard Hale, one of the company's senior managers. His smile wasn't warm, it was sharp, the kind that sought to cut rather than comfort. His eyes scanned the room before narrowing on Marcus. He walked over, hands in his pockets, and smirked. "You here for the janitor's position?" A ripple of uncomfortable laughter moved through the room. A few candidates exchanged looks, amused at Marcus's expense. Marcus's jaw tightened. He lifted his head, locking eyes with Richard. "No, sir, I'm here for the management trainee interview." Richard chuckled, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Management? You? Listen, son, we're looking for people who fit the culture here. You know what I mean?" His voice lowered on the word fit, making the implication clear. Marcus felt heat rise to his cheeks. He wanted to lash out, to defend himself, but he kept his voice steady. "I believe my qualifications speak for themselves." Qualifications? Richard raised an eyebrow as if the word itself was a joke. "Let me guess. Community college, a couple of odd jobs, and now you think you can run an office?" Marcus's fists clenched under the folder in his lap. He wasn't just some underqualified hopeful. He had worked nights at a warehouse to put himself through school, graduated with honors, completed an internship at a Fortune 500 company, and earned leadership awards. But none of that seemed to matter in Richard's eyes. Before Marcus could respond, a firm voice cut through the tension. "Richard!" Everyone turned. A woman in a tailored blazer, holding a folder marked with the company seal, had entered the lobby. Her badge read Annika Patel, HR Director. Richard straightened, the smirk faltering. "Just welcoming the candidates." Miss Patel's eyes flicked to Marcus, then down at the folder she carried. "Marcus Williams?" Marcus stood, his posture straighter than before. "Yes, ma'am," she smiled warmly. "I was reviewing your resume. Impressive. Honors graduate, leadership award, and a solid internship record. We've been looking forward to meeting you." The room fell silent. The same people who had chuckled earlier now looked at Marcus with wide eyes. The resume Richard had mocked without seeing was now being praised by the head of HR herself. Richard's smirk dissolved completely. He muttered something about needing to check on a call and exited the room quickly, his confidence visibly cracked. Marcus exhaled, a quiet relief washing over him. For the first time that morning, he felt truly seen, not for the color of his skin, not for assumptions about his background, but for the effort and determination he had carried through every step of his journey. Ms. Patel placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "Don't let anyone make you feel small here. You earned this interview, and I expect you'll do well." As she guided him toward the conference room, Marcus felt taller. Whatever the outcome, this moment reminded him that respect couldn't be demanded by arrogance. It was earned by persistence, resilience, and truth, and this was only the beginning. The conference room smelled faintly of leather and paper, its long mahogany table polished to a mirror finish. Tall windows let in shafts of morning light, cutting across the room and illuminating the plaques and awards on the walls. This was the heart of Hamilton and Comasi, where decisions worth millions were made every day. Marcus followed Miss Patel inside, his steps measured but firm. He could feel the stares of the other applicants behind him, their whispered thoughts trailing in his wake. Some pitied him, others were suddenly intimidated, but Marcus blocked it out. This was his moment. "Please have a seat," Miss Patel said, guiding him toward the far end of the table. 3 panelists sat across from him, each with notepads and neatly stacked resumes. There was Mr. Collins, the head of operations, his expression unreadable behind square-framed glasses. Beside him sat Dr. Emily Rivers, a consultant with a reputation for being both brilliant and brutally honest. And at the far left, glaring, silently, was Richard Hale. He had returned, his jaw tight, his earlier arrogance replaced by something colder. Marcus's pulse quickened, but he kept his face calm. Ms. Patel introduced him, highlighting his academic and internship achievements, before stepping aside. Then the questioning began. "Tell us about a time you faced a significant challenge and how you overcame it," Dr. Rivers asked first, her tone professional. Marcus nodded, steadying himself. "During my internship at Harper & Sons, I was assigned to a logistics project that had fallen weeks behind. Most of the team had given up on meeting the deadline. I stayed late for 3 weeks, reorganized the data system, and streamlined communication between departments. By the end, we not only met the deadline, but saved the company additional costs. My supervisor recommended me for a leadership award. After that, Dr. Rivers's brows lifted slightly, impressed. She made a note on her pad. Mr. Collins leaned forward. "Leadership isn't just about hard work. How do you handle conflict in a team?" Marcus thought for a moment, then spoke carefully. "Conflict is natural when people care about their work. In my experience, the best way to resolve it is by listening first. Everyone wants to feel heard. Once people see their concerns are valued, they're more willing to compromise. I've seen arguments dissolve just because someone finally stopped talking long enough to listen." Mr. Collins gave a small nod. Richard finally spoke, his voice sharp. "Listening is good, but what if someone just isn't capable? What if they're not cut out for the role?" His eyes bore into Marcus with unspoken malice. The question wasn't about teamwork, it was about him. Marcus felt the weight of the insult beneath the surface. He inhaled slowly, refusing to take the bait. "In every role there's a learning curve," Marcus said evenly. "I don't believe people should be dismissed too quickly. With proper guidance, most people can rise to expectations. And if they can't, then it's a manager's job to place them where their strengths can shine. That's leadership, helping people succeed, not proving them unworthy." Dr. Rivers tilted her head, intrigued. Mr. Collins scribbled more notes. Richard's lip curled, but before he could push further, Ms. Patel interjected. "Thank you, Marcus, that's an excellent perspective." The interview continued, covering problem-solving scenarios, ethical dilemmas, and future goals. Marcus answered honestly, never overpromising, never downplaying his abilities. His confidence grew with each question. But then Dr. Rivers asked the question that silenced the room. "Marcus, in your resume you mentioned working nights while attending school full-time. That couldn't have been easy. Why did you keep going when most would have quit?" Marcus's throat tightened. For a second, he wasn't in the boardroom anymore. He was back in his tiny apartment, helping his younger sister with homework, while folding warehouse uniforms. He remembered the exhaustion, the hunger, the nights where quitting seemed easier than breathing. He swallowed hard and spoke. "Because quitting wasn't an option. My sister depended on me. I wanted her to see that no matter how unfair the world is, hard work can still carve out a path forward. I kept going because stopping would have meant failing her, and myself." The room was still. Even Richard couldn't find words. Dr. Rivers smiled faintly. "Thank you for your honesty." The panel wrapped up, and Ms. Patel stood. "That will be all for now. We'll be in touch soon." As Marcus gathered his things and walked out, he caught Richard's glare again, sharp, cold, and dangerous. It wasn't just disdain anymore. It was personal. And Marcus knew. This battle was far from over. The lobby felt different when Marcus stepped out of the interview room. The chatter had dulled. eyes that once carried amusement now held something closer to curiosity. Some of the other candidates avoided his gaze. Others looked at him with a newfound respect. Marcus ignored them. He needed air. He pushed through the revolving glass doors and stepped onto the busy street. The city roared around him, honking cars, footsteps rushing across crosswalks, vendors calling out their wares. Yet in his chest there was only silence, the heavy aftertaste of Richard's glare still burning in his mind. Marcus walked to a bench near the corner coffee cart. He sat down, loosening his tie, breathing deep. For a moment, he allowed himself to feel proud. He had spoken with confidence, answered with clarity. He had survived Richard's attempts to break him, but the pride was short-lived. Through the glass, he saw Richard standing near the elevators with another man, speaking in low tones. The other man was younger, sharply dressed, clearly another candidate. Richard leaned close, his lips curled in a sly grin, his eyes cutting toward Marcus outside. The younger man nodded, smirking. Marcus's stomach sank. He knew that look. Richard wasn't done. Inside the building, whispers began to spread. "That guy, Marcus, right? Doesn't look like he belongs here. I heard Hale doesn't want him in the program. Better not get on the wrong side of Richard." The younger candidate Richard had spoken to, his name was Brian, walked out to the lobby and made a show of sitting near Marcus. His voice carried just enough for others to hear. "Tough interview, huh?" he said, smirking. "Don't take it personally. This place, it's not really for people like you." Marcus turned his head slowly. "People like me." Brian leaned back, stretching arrogantly. "You know what I mean. Connections, pedigree. Some of us were born for the boardroom, some of us not so much." He gave Marcus a once-over, his eyes dripping with disdain. Marcus's jaw clenched. He thought about snapping back, tearing through Brian's smugness with the truth. But then he remembered Dr. Rivers's question, why he hadn't quit. His sister's face flashed in his mind. Quitting, fighting, exploding, it wasn't an option, not here. Instead, Marcus stood calmly, buttoned his jacket and walked away without a word. But Richard had been watching from inside. His smile widened. Marcus's silence wasn't victory in Richard's eyes. It was weakness. Later that afternoon in the HR office, Ms. Patel was sorting through resumes when Richard stepped in uninvited. "Annika," he said smoothly, leaning against her desk. "We need to talk about Marcus Williams." She looked up unimpressed. "What about him?" Richard shrugged casually. "He's not the right fit. You saw him. Nervous, unpolished. We're Hamilton & Co., not some charity program, Mrs. Patel's eyes narrowed. "I saw a young man with grit, with intelligence, and with more determination than half the people who walk through these doors." Richard smirked. "Determination doesn't change culture. Our clients expect a certain presentation." "You mean skin color?" Ms. Patel's voice was cold steel. Richard didn't flinch. "I mean professionalism. Don't twist my words." She set her pen down deliberately. "Marcus has more professionalism than you showed in that lobby. You humiliated him in front of every candidate, Richard. Don't think I didn't notice." For the first time, Richard's smile faltered. He straightened, masking his irritation. "At the end of the day, I'm just protecting the company. You know what clients expect." Ms. Patel held his gaze firmly. "What clients expect is results. And if Marcus delivers those results, nothing else matters." Richard left the office with a stiff jaw, his plan already shifting. If he couldn't discredit Marcus in front of the panel, he'd do it another way. That evening, Marcus returned home to his small apartment. His younger sister, Naomi, was sprawled on the couch with her textbooks, her glasses slipping down her nose. She looked up when he entered. "How'd it go?" she asked, eyes wide with hope. Marcus forced a smile. "It went, well, better than I expected." Naomi grinned, relief flooding her face. "I knew it. You've got this." But as she turned back to her homework, Marcus's smile faded. He knew he had done well. He knew Ms. Patel believed in him. But Richard's shadow lingered, dark and deliberate. This wasn't over, and Marcus could already feel the storm building. The next morning, Marcus woke up earlier than usual. His nerves buzzed with both hope and unease. Today, the company was hosting a second-round group assessment where candidates would be placed into teams to solve a mock business problem. It was designed to test leadership, teamwork, and problem-solving. Marcus straightened his tie in the cracked bathroom mirror, his sister Naomi leaning against the doorframe, munching on toast. "You'll crush it," she said confidently. He smiled, though the weight in his chest was heavy. "Let's hope so." At Hamilton & Co., the candidates gathered in a sleek conference hall. Laptops and folders were arranged neatly on tables, and each group was assigned a scenario. A struggling company seeking solutions. Marcus was placed in a group of 5. To his dismay, Brian, the smug candidate Richard had whispered with yesterday, was on his team. And worse, Richard himself walked in, arms crossed, clearly supervising this particular group. His smirk told Marcus everything. This wasn't coincidence. "All right," Richard announced. "Your task is to create a restructuring plan for a failing retail chain. You've got 1 hour. Show us who deserves to be here." The group dove in quickly. One candidate dominated the conversation with flashy but unrealistic ideas. Brian nodded along, feeding the chaos. Marcus, however, stayed quiet, taking notes, observing. When he finally spoke, his tone was calm but firm. "We need to focus on sustainability. Cutting staff might look good short-term, but it'll collapse morale. Instead, we can streamline logistics, renegotiate supplier contracts, and invest in e-commerce expansion." The room went quiet. It was practical, balanced, logical. But Brian smirked. "Sounds nice, but that's textbook theory. Clients want bold moves, not safe answers." Richard chimed in, his voice dripping with false authority. "He's got a point. Playing it safe isn't leadership, Marcus." Marcus swallowed hard. He could feel the setup, the trap being laid, but he refused to back down. "With respect," Marcus said, steadying his voice, "reckless decisions aren't leadership either. Leadership is about seeing the long game. Any fool can cut costs. A leader builds a foundation that lasts." The other candidates exchanged glances. One of them, a young woman named Sarah, nodded slowly. "Actually, I think Marcus is right. Logistics optimization could save millions without layoffs." Brian rolled his eyes. "Fine, let's put his long game on the board." He scribbled Marcus's ideas down but twisted them, emphasizing the risk instead of the benefit. Richard stood by, arms crossed, letting the distortion unfold. When time was up, the groups presented their solutions. Marcus's group went last. Brian confidently took the lead, pitching the plan as if it were his own, but skewing Marcus's ideas into something flimsy. "We propose minimal layoffs, but mostly relying on logistical changes and e-commerce investments," he said dismissively, making it sound weak. Richard raised an eyebrow, pretending to be unimpressed. "Interesting. But isn't that too cautious for today's market?" Marcus's chest tightened. He had 2 choices. Stay silent and let his work be undermined, or risk calling out Brian in front of everyone, and Richard. He chose the latter. "Excuse me," Marcus said, standing slightly. All eyes turned to him. "With respect, that wasn't the plan I proposed. My point wasn't about avoiding risks. It was about balancing them. Logistics restructuring can cut overhead significantly, while e-commerce growth opens new revenue streams. It's not safe, it's smart, and it saves jobs while building sustainability." The room hushed. Even some of the executives observing nodded faintly. Richard's jaw tightened. He forced a smile. "Noted. Thank you, Marcus." But his eyes were sharp, cold. After the session, Marcus gathered his things. Sarah approached him quietly. "You were right in there, don't let them twist it." Marcus managed a small smile. "Thanks." But as he left, he overheard Richard speaking quietly to Brian near the exit. "Next time, don't just twist his ideas, make sure he fails, do you understand?" Brian smirked. Crystal clear, Marcus walked past without reacting, but inside the fire burned hotter. They weren't just doubting him, they were plotting against him. And Marcus realized this wasn't just about winning a job anymore. It was about fighting for his right to be seen. The next day, Marcus arrived at Hamilton & Co. with a knot in his stomach. The group assessments were over, but now came the individual case study presentation. the most critical part of the selection process. Each candidate had been given a scenario to analyze overnight, with just 24 hours to prepare a presentation for the senior panel. Marcus had worked late into the night in his small apartment, surrounded by papers and an old laptop that wheezed with every keystroke. Naomi had kept him company, quizzing him on potential questions while sipping instant noodles. "You've got this, Marcus," she had said firmly, pushing his notes back at him whenever he tried to take a break. "They can't ignore you if you show them your mind." Now standing in the lobby with his folder, Marcus repeated her words silently like a prayer. Richard was already waiting upstairs, leaning casually against the wall outside the presentation room. His smile was razor-thin. "Ready to embarrass yourself?" he murmured when Marcus walked by. Marcus didn't reply. He refused to give Richard the satisfaction of a reaction. Inside the room, the panel sat Ms. Patel, Dr. Rivers, Mr. Collins, and a few others. Marcus was up third. The first two candidates delivered flashy but shallow presentations, filled with buzzwords but little substance. The panel nodded politely, unimpressed. Then it was Marcus's turn. He walked to the front, set down his notes, and breathed deeply. He didn't have flashy slides or corporate jargon, but he had clarity. "Good morning," he began, his voice steady. The case study asked how to revive a failing tech company. Most would say cut staff or merge, but I believe the answer lies in innovation and outreach. Cutting corners won't save a company that has lost its vision. Rebuilding trust with customers will. He walked them through a step-by-step plan, streamlining product lines, reinvesting in R&D, launching a customer engagement campaign. His ideas were clear, data-driven, and practical. When he finished, there was a pause. Then, Dr. Rivers leaned back, smiling faintly. "That," she said, "is the first presentation today that actually answered the question." Marcus's chest swelled with cautious relief. He had done it, but Richard wasn't finished. "Interesting," Richard said smoothly, pretending to flip through his notes. "But Marcus, didn't you borrow some of these ideas?" The room stilled. Marcus frowned. "Excuse me," Richard smirked. "I couldn't help noticing your plan sounds awfully similar to a proposal submitted by one of our junior associates last quarter." "Practically word for word." Marcus's pulse spiked. "That's not true. I developed this plan myself." Richard shrugged, feigning innocence. "Coincidence, then?" "Because plagiarism is a serious concern at Hamilton & Co." The panel's eyes flicked to Marcus. Doubt hung heavy in the air. Marcus's throat tightened. He thought of Naomi, of all the nights he had sacrificed, of the truth he had lived. To have it stolen, twisted like this, it was unbearable. "I didn't plagiarize," Marcus said firmly, forcing calm into his voice. "Everything here is my own work. I can show my notes, my drafts, even the timestamps on my laptop. This is mine." Ms. Patel's eyes narrowed at Richard. "That's enough, Richard. Unless you have proof, don't throw baseless accusations." Richard spread his hands innocently. "Just doing my due diligence." But Marcus could see the flicker in some of the panelists' eyes. Uncertainty, hesitation, a seed of doubt had been planted. After the session, Marcus walked out, his hands shaking. Sarah, the candidate who had supported him before, hurried. After him. "Don't let him get to you," she whispered. "Your presentation was the best one today. They saw it." Marcus forced a smile. "Did they?" She hesitated, then nodded. "Ms. Patel believes in you. Dr. Rivers, too. Richards just threatened." But Marcus knew better. Threats weren't harmless. Threats could grow into shadows that followed you, whispered about you, poisoned rooms before you even entered. And Richard wasn't done. That evening, as Marcus left the building, he saw Richard, standing outside with Brian. Both of them stopped talking when Marcus passed. Richard smiled coldly. "Careful, Williams," he said under his breath. "One mistake and you're out, and I'll make sure everyone remembers why." Marcus walked on, his fists tight in his pockets, his heart pounding. This wasn't just prejudice anymore. It was war. Marcus's apartment felt unusually heavy that night. The dim yellow lamp flickered against the peeling wallpaper as he sat hunched over his old laptop, scrolling through his presentation notes again and again. He knew the work was his. Every word, every number had been built from scratch, hammered, out in late hours while Naomi quizzed him with tired but encouraging eyes. And yet, Richard's accusation lingered like a poison in his mind. Plagiarism. One word was all it took to unravel months of effort, to stain his name before it had even been written into the company's books. Naomi padded into the living room, rubbing her eyes. "You're still awake." Marcus closed the laptop quickly, forcing a smile. "Couldn't sleep, just double-checking my work." She frowned, sensing the lie. "Marcus, you did great. Stop torturing yourself. If they can't see it, that's their problem." Her words were soft, but Marcus felt the weight of them. She believed in him. He couldn't let Richard win. The next morning, the candidates were gathered again in the conference hall for a surprise exercise. The tension was thicker than ever. Everyone had heard whispers of Richard's accusations. Some eyed Marcus sympathetically. Others avoided him, wary of being associated with a candidate under suspicion. Richard strolled in like a king entering his court. "Good morning, everyone," he said, his voice smooth. "Today's exercise is about integrity under pressure. Let's see who really belongs here." His gaze flicked deliberately toward Marcus. The task was simple on the surface: draft a quick crisis response plan for a hypothetical client. But Richard had rigged it. Half the instructions were vague and the deadline was brutally short. Marcus dove in, his pen moving fast across the page. He structured the plan clearly. Identify the issue, reassure stakeholders, implement corrective measures and communicate transparently. It wasn't flashy, but it was solid. Brian, meanwhile, scribbled a dramatic, showy proposal, cutting corners, promising impossible results. When time was called, the candidates presented one by one. When Marcus's turn came, he stood, his voice steady. "In a crisis, clarity and honesty are vital. Cover-ups collapse. Short-term tricks erode trust. My plan ensures the company responds quickly while protecting long-term credibility." A few panelists nodded thoughtfully. Then Brian presented. His plan sparkled with big promises, dramatic gestures, and buzzwords. Richard clapped as if he had just witnessed genius. "Well done, Brian," Richard said loudly. "That's the kind of bold thinking we need here." His eyes cut toward Marcus, mocking. Miss Patel, however, raised a hand. "Bold, yes, but unrealistic. Clients don't want fireworks. They want stability. Marcus's plan may be less glamorous, but it's grounded." Richard's jaw tightened. He forced a smile. Different philosophies, I suppose. After the session, Marcus lingered by the elevators, gathering his notes. That's when he overheard two junior staff members chatting nearby. "Did you hear? Hale's been telling people that Marcus cheated on his case study." "Really? I thought his presentation was strong." "Doesn't matter. Once Hale says it, people believe it." Marcus's stomach sank. The whisper campaign had begun. He turned to leave, but Richard was already there, leaning casually against the wall. "Careful, Williams," he murmured. "In this business, reputation is everything. Once it's gone, it doesn't matter how hard you work." Marcus clenched his fists. For the first time, anger boiled past his restraint. "Why are you doing this? What did I ever do to you?" Richard's smile was thin, cruel. "You walked into a room that wasn't built for you, and you thought you belonged. That's your mistake." Marcus's chest heaved. For a moment he considered lashing out, telling Richard exactly what he deserved. But then he saw Naomi's face in his mind, her belief, her trust. He swallowed the anger and stepped away. But as he walked out of the building into the sharp, morning air, he knew something had shifted. Richard wasn't just trying to keep him out, he was trying to destroy him. And if Marcus didn't fight back soon, he might succeed. The city skyline twinkled outside the tall glass windows of the firm as the candidates filed out for the evening. Most were eager to leave behind the tension of the day, but Marcus lingered, his mind restless. He could feel the invisible threads Richard was weaving around him, threads of rumor and doubt that threatened to strangle his chance before it had even begun. Naomi called that evening. "How'd it go today?" she asked, her voice hopeful. Marcus sighed, slumping against the apartment wall. "Richard's turning everyone against me." He praised Brian like he invented business strategy. And me? He made me look like I was a fraud. Naomi was quiet for a moment. Then she said firmly, "Truth doesn't need fireworks. It just needs light. Sooner or later, people see it." Her faith steadied him. But he knew words alone wouldn't. "Stop, Richard." The next day, the candidates were told they would work in pairs to solve a practical case. Marcus's chest tightened when the list was read. His partner? Brian Hale. Brian smirked when they sat down together. "Relax, Marcus. I'll take the lead. You can just follow my notes." Marcus gritted his teeth. "We're supposed to work together." "Sure," Brian said, already scribbling, "but let's face it, you're already under suspicion. Best not to drag me down with you." Marcus ignored him and focused on the case. It was about restructuring a struggling family business. While Brian drafted flashy recommendations, selling assets, firing staff, chasing short-term profit, Marcus quietly analyzed the deeper issues: outdated systems, lack of succession planning, broken communication. When presentation time came, Brian pushed forward, hogging the spotlight. "We recommend cutting costs immediately, selling unproductive divisions and maximizing quarterly profits." His words sparkled but rang hollow. Then Marcus stepped up. His voice was calm but firm. "This business isn't just numbers. It's people. If we gut it for fast profit, we destroy trust and legacy. Instead, we must modernize systems, reinvest in staff, and build succession from within. That ensures survival not just for a quarter, but for a generation." The room was quiet. Several senior executives exchanged intrigued looks. Richard broke the silence with a dry chuckle. "Idealistic but naive. Businesses don't survive on dreams, Williams." Ms. Patel, however, leaned forward. "Idealism or foresight? Your candidate here," she looked at Marcus, "just gave a textbook answer on sustainable business strategy." Marcus felt a spark of vindication. For the first time, the panel was openly seeing through Richard's bias, but the victory was short-lived. Later that evening, Marcus found an email forwarded to the review board. It contained a suspiciously similar case study, nearly identical to his. Attached was a note from Richard. "Evidence suggests candidate Williams may have copied from external sources. I recommend immediate review." Marcus's hands shook as he read it. The words blurred on the screen. He knew he hadn't copied anything. His work was his own. But with this, Richard was manufacturing proof. Suddenly, Marcus heard footsteps. He turned to see Ms. Patel standing in the doorway, watching him carefully. "You saw the email, didn't you?" she asked quietly. Marcus nodded, his throat tight. "It's not true, I didn't copy." Patel studied him for a long moment, then said, "I believe you. But you need to understand something. Men like Hale don't play fair. If you don't, find a way to defend yourself. His story will become the truth." Her words sent a shiver through him. For the first time, Marcus realized this wasn't just about a job interview anymore. It was about survival in a world stacked against him. As he left the building that night, the city lights seemed harsher, colder. Richard Hale was tightening the noose. But Marcus was no longer just waiting for the storm to pass. He was preparing to fight back. The next morning, the atmosphere inside the firm was tense. The candidates whispered in corners, their eyes darting toward Marcus as though he carried a mark on his back. The rumor about him copying had spread like wildfire. Richard Hale's poison had worked. When Marcus walked into the boardroom, the air felt heavy. Richard was already there, leaning casually against the long conference table, a smirk tugging at the corner of his lips. Brian sat nearby, barely containing his grin. Mr. Douglas, one of the senior partners, cleared his throat. "Mr. Williams, we've received a troubling report. There are concerns that your presentation yesterday was not entirely your own." Marcus's chest tightened, but he forced himself to stand tall. "With all due respect, sir, my work was original. I can prove it." Richard raised an eyebrow. "Really?" "Because the similarities to this case study," he slid a printed document across the table, "are too close to ignore." Marcus picked it up. His stomach dropped. The case study had nearly word-for-word passages from his own notes, but he knew he hadn't taken them from anywhere. Someone had taken his work and planted it. Naomi's voice echoed in his head. "Truth doesn't need fireworks. It just needs light." He steadied his breath. That's my writing, but I never shared it outside this building, which means someone else did. The board members exchanged uneasy glances. Richard laughed lightly, masking his unease. So, you're accusing someone else here? That's bold, Williams, perhaps desperate. Before Marcus could reply, Ms. Patel spoke. I was here when Williams worked. I observed his analysis firsthand. He built it in front of us. The room shifted. Richard's smirk faltered, but then Brian chimed in smoothly. Well, maybe he rehearsed it beforehand with that case study. Maybe that's why it looked so polished. A dangerous seed of doubt was planted again. That evening, Marcus sat in his apartment, his laptop open, but his mind spinning. Every step forward felt like walking into a trap, then a ping. A new email. It was from an anonymous sender. Subject, "You're not crazy." Inside was a screenshot. Richard Hale in his office holding Marcus's notebook, flipping through it with a satisfied grin. Attached was another message. He's been copying your work, then framing you. Watch carefully tomorrow. Marcus's pulse pounded. Someone inside was watching Richard and helping him. But who? He didn't know if it was a trap or a lifeline. Still, it was the first crack in Richard's armor. The next day, during the group challenge, Marcus acted as if nothing was wrong, but his eyes stayed sharp watching Richard. The task: design a full-scale marketing plan for a struggling tech company. Marcus worked steadily, careful and precise. He noticed, however, that every time he set his pen down, Richard's gaze flicked toward his notes. During a short break, Marcus pretended to leave his notebook behind. He slipped quietly back after a few minutes, just in time to see Richard, leaning over his chair, snapping photos of the pages with his phone. Marcus's heart hammered. Caught you. This time Marcus didn't speak. He didn't confront Richard. Instead, he pulled out his phone and silently took his own photo from the reflection of the glass wall. Proof. The board thought Marcus was the suspect, but soon they'd see the real thief. That night, Marcus couldn't sleep. The city outside buzzed with energy, but his mind was locked on one thought. Exposing Richard would mean risking everything. If the board believed Richard over him again, it was over. But for the first time, Marcus wasn't afraid, because now he had a weapon. The hunter was about to become the hunted. The boardroom buzzed with anticipation the next morning. It was the final group presentation, the last chance for the candidates to prove themselves before the official decision. The air was thick with tension. Marcus could feel it pressing down on his chest, but this time he wasn't afraid. He had come prepared. Richard, on the other hand, exuded arrogance. He walked in wearing a sharp navy suit, his smile confident, his voice slick as he greeted the partners. Brian trailed behind him like a loyal shadow, smirking at Marcus as if the outcome was already decided. The presentations began. Each group laid out their strategies. Some stumbled, some shined. When Marcus's turn came, he stood before the panel, with steady hands and clear eyes. His plan was structured, innovative, and bold, but it wasn't just the plan he had come to deliver. When he finished, polite applause followed. Richard rose smoothly, ready to undercut him. "If I may," Richard said, adjusting his cufflinks, "while Williams's presentation was impressive, there are lingering concerns about his credibility. After all, repeated similarities with external material cannot be ignored." Whispers rippled through the room. Richard had played this card before, and it had worked. But Marcus didn't flinch. Instead, he spoke calmly. "I'm glad Mr. Hale brought that up because I'd like to share something with the board." He turned, connecting his laptop to the projector. A photo appeared on the screen. Richard caught on. Camera, hovering over Marcus's chair. His phone snapping pictures of Marcus's notes. The timestamp was clear. The reflection of the glass wall made the image undeniable. Gasps erupted. Richard's confident mask cracked. This is ridiculous. Out of context. Anyone could—" Marcus interrupted, his voice steady. "I didn't take those words from anyone. They were taken from me, and now I can prove it." He pulled up a second file, a digital log from his laptop, showing the exact time and date when his work was created, days before Richard had claimed it. "I've documented everything, every draft, Every revision. It's all mine. The silence. That followed was suffocating. The partners exchanged stunned glances. Ms. Patel leaned forward, her voice firm. "Mr. Hale, do you have any explanation for why you were photographing another candidate's notes?" Richard's mouth opened, but no words came out. His face flushed red, his composure shattering. Brian muttered under his breath, "This can't be happening." Mr. Douglas stood. His voice carried weight. "Integrity is the foundation of this firm. If what we've seen is true, then not only has Mr. Williams been wrongfully accused, but we've nearly rewarded the wrong man for his deceit." The room erupted in murmurs. Marcus stood quietly, his chest rising and falling, feeling the tide. "Finally shift." Richard tried one last move. "You can't just take his word over mine. I've given years to this firm, I've built relationships." But before he could finish, Naomi, who had entered silently moments before, spoke up from the back of the room. "Relationships built on lies crumble the fastest." Her voice was calm, but it sliced through the air like a blade. Every head turned. Naomi walked forward, placing a file on the table. "I've been observing the candidates closely, and I've seen more than enough to know where the truth lies." She looked at Marcus, then back at the board. "The question now isn't whether Williams is capable. It's whether this firm has the courage to stand by integrity instead of arrogance." The room was dead silent. Richard's face had gone pale. For the first time, Marcus felt the power shift fully into his hands. The hunter had been exposed, and the final blow was yet to come. The boardroom felt like a courtroom now. Every eye was locked on Richard, whose polished confidence had melted into desperation. Sweat beaded on his forehead as silence dragged on. Finally, Mr. Douglas spoke. His voice was grave, steady, like a gavel striking. "Mr. Hale, we've reviewed the evidence. There is no question that you attempted to pass off Mr. Williams's work as your own. That is a violation not only of company policy, but of basic human integrity." Richard's lips trembled. "You can't do this. I've given this firm my life. You think he can replace me? A man like him?" His last words slipped out bitter, laced with the prejudice he'd tried to hide all along. The room froze. Naomi's eyes narrowed. Miss Patel leaned back in her chair, disgust flashing across her face. Mr. Douglas's jaw tightened. Marcus, however, remained calm. He didn't need to fight anymore. The truth had already spoken for him. "Enough," Mr. Douglas said firmly. "Pack your things, Mr. Hale. Effective immediately. You are terminated." Gasps filled the room. Richard staggered back, his face drained of color. Brian tried to speak up. "Sir, maybe we should—" but was silenced by Ms. Patel's sharp glance. Richard looked around wildly, searching for an ally, but found only cold stares. For the first time in his career, his charm failed him. He was nothing but exposed. With shaking hands, he grabbed his briefcase and stormed out, the door slamming behind him. The sound echoed like a final nail in his coffin. Silence lingered until Mr. Douglas turned to Marcus. His stern expression softened into something rare. Respect. "Mr. Williams," he said, standing, "what you've shown today is not only talent but resilience. You defended yourself with dignity, even when wrongly accused. That is the kind of integrity this firm needs." Naomi smiled proudly. Ms. Patel nodded in agreement. "It would be my honor," Douglas continued, "to officially welcome you as the newest member of this firm, on a full contract with immediate effect." Applause broke out, genuine, thunderous applause that filled the room. Marcus's chest tightened. He looked down for a moment, feeling tears prick his eyes, then lifted his chin. This wasn't just a job, this was justice. This was the validation of every late night, every rejection, every moment he had been underestimated because of the color of his skin. Naomi leaned toward him, whispering, "I told you. The truth always wins." Later that evening, as Marcus left the building with his new employee badge in hand, the city lights seemed brighter. The same revolving glass doors that had once shut him out now opened wide, welcoming him as one of their own. Across the street, he noticed Richard sitting alone on a bench, tie undone, face buried in his hands. For a moment, Marcus stopped. He could have gloated, could have thrown back every insult he'd endured, but instead he simply walked on. Because victory wasn't about watching Richard fall, it was about rising above. And as he stepped into the night, Marcus knew this was only the beginning. The boy they once dismissed had become the man they could no longer ignore.